Bethany, we're going to have a great summer. We're talking about the women in the Bible. Are you excited?
Yes, I am. We have so many characters that we're going to pull out from the Bible of amazing women.
So stay tuned.
We'll see you there.
So we're talking about Hannah today. You can find that in the book of 1 Samuel, mainly chapters 1 and 2. And Bethany, I don't know about you, but the theme I saw through this was faith. There's a lot of people with faith in this story. What did you think about it?
I see what you're saying about faith. I see persistence and just a surrendering, I think, in her life.
Yeah.
This is an interesting time period in Israel's history, too. Joshua's passed away, and then they went through and they had all these judges. They didn't have kings yet, but they had judges. So it's just interesting, that whole piece. And this is before they had the temple.
Yes.
So it's kind of a in-between time in the history book. Would you want to jump into the story right away?
Well, I wanted to maybe share who the main people are. And,
I love it. The main characters.
Yeah.
This is good.
Elkanah, who is the husband to Hannah, and he is a man of faith. And then we have, of course, Hannah, who is the mother of Samuel, and she is a woman of faith. And then we have Peninnah, who is Elkanah's other wife, who you will find out what she's like. I won't spoil it. And then Eli the priest and Samuel. There's other people that pop into the story later. I'm sure once you hear some of this, you're going to want to dive into what happens next because it's very interesting. It's a good story in the Bible.
I want to throw a little bit extra in here. We actually see two minor characters who will come up later down the road in Hophni and Phinehas, who were Eli's sons. And this comes in, if you keep reading in the story, Samuel is very instrumental in telling Eli what's going to happen with his sons. So I think this whole first part of Samuel is setting the stage for a bunch of stuff coming up. And if you look at it as the beginning of a book or a play, setting the characters is really important. So whoever is writing Samuel, and I don't know who wrote Samuel.
Samuel did.
So he's setting your stage of like, okay, here are all your characters. So I think that's cool.
Yes. So once a year, they would all go to worship the Lord. And they lived in the hill country of Ephraim in Jerusalem. And they were going to Shiloh, where the temple of the Lord was set up. It's more of a tent that the Lord directed the people to make.
Wouldn't it have been similar to what they made on their way from Egypt?
Yes. And you can find it in Exodus. And that's where it describes all of the rules and all the things.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. God was very detailed about building and all the rules around it. So back to this story, they would go up to the temple. And mind you, this is kind of a fun little tidbit. I did a little research. It takes about one full day or roughly 6 hours of continuous travel from where they were in Ephraim to Shiloh. So that's a long ways walking, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to just bring this up. 1 Samuel 1, 4 through 6. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to his wife, Peninnah, and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he gave a double portion because he loved her, but the Lord had closed her womb. And because the Lord had closed her womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. So really, Peninnah, she was a big bully. You know, she had these kids, and that was a big deal back in the day to have kids, especially sons. And I can only imagine how hard that would be for Hannah to deal with that every time they would walk. What did I say? 6 hours of continuous travel. She's poking at her and, you know, giving her a hard time the whole time. Right, Bethany?
Well, yeah, but I have a little different insight on this because if we fast forward a little bit, a couple more verses, in verse 8 said, when Elkanah, her husband, said to her, Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? And why is your heart grieved? Am I not better to you than 10 sons? So there's a little bit of, well, he's got favoritism towards Hannah, and Peninnah, she has the children. So in her eyes, she's looking for her husband's affection because she's producing children for him, but he's in love with Hannah, who hasn't given him any children. So we have one gal over here that doesn't feel worthy to be loved by her husband as much as she is because she hasn't given him
Mm-hmm.
children. And then we have one that's wanting her husband's love, but he isn't giving it to her. He's giving it to the. So there's a lot. And this is, to me, this just shows that you shouldn't have multiple wives. I mean, at this time,
Yeah.
it was considered okay. But even at this time, it was still difficult. I mean, think about the husband. He can't keep either one of his wives happy. One is upset
Mm.
because she can't have any children. The other one is upset because he doesn't love her because, so there's a lot. I mean, this family is not, it's not a happy family. A lot
No,
of,
not at all.
and you're right, 6 hours on the road with family.
Right. And all the
That's
kids.
a long car trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a walking trip. So you
Right.
can't like
You can get
get away
from
from
them.
anyone. Like,
Mhm.
can we have a rest stop and, go play around in the store for a little bit or whatever? I see your point. I agree that what a blessing Hannah has for the husband to favor her and care about her, give her double portions. And she honors her husband. It says in the story where he's like, you got to eat, And so she does eat right before she goes into the temple. And I also want to point out before we get too far ahead is notice it says the Lord closed her womb. It says it twice in that verse. And I was curious about that. And it said in what I studied that scholars say it was God's plan, but we don't know why. Okay.
Mhm.
We don't really know why. And so I thought that was interesting. And I wanted to point that out because this whole thing is reminiscent of Sarah and Hagar. If you remember Hagar,
Mhm.
Hagar despised Sarah after giving birth to Ishmael. Those were the words.
Mhm.
Because then she had the
Right.
child. I don't want Sarah around. I want to be the main show here. That's kind of how I interpreted that.
Uh-huh.
But Sarah was barren too. And remember, God
Mhm.
promised Abraham.
That his descendants would outnumber the stars in the sky, and he had no children. That's a hard
Right,
thing when they don't even have any children.
right. And Sarah, guess what? She did. So remember, God promised them those descendants. And, his
Mhm.
timing is perfect, but Sarah was, impatient. And so he promised them. And yes, she was 90 years old when she conceived Isaac. So he always comes through with his promises.
Very true.
Yeah. But I did bring that up because it was very similar in that they were both barren. And then the other one was giving the other one a hard time.
Rachel was barren for a time, Jacob's wife. And then fast forward to John the Baptist's mother. She couldn't have children. When I was doing my research, they were saying, all of these women who struggled having children, all the children that came after that were very important. And I
Yes.
thought about that and I was like, wow, that is so interesting. So it's just like God had a plan, like you said, and we don't always understand his plan. And I was wondering about, we're going to talk a little bit more about Hannah, and I don't know if we want to keep going with that, but
Yeah.
the
I'd
next
like to
part.
go to the next part. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's when she went to the temple and prayed and made a vow to the Lord to give her a son. And if he did, she would dedicate him to the Lord, and no razor would come to his head, which means he would be a Nazarite, a person set apart for God's service. Right?
Verse 10 is interesting. Yes.
Go ahead.
And it says, and she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. And
Mm.
I just think about says a lot. I mean,
Mhm.
she was a bitterness of soul I would say that's anger and just like all of the pent up stuff, that whole walk. And we don't know. I mean, they came up every year. Do we not know that she didn't pray every single year for the same thing when she came to
Mm.
the temple? We don't know. I would
Mhm.
assume this isn't her first prayer. I would assume that she's just like, okay, maybe this year God will grant me a child. Didn't happen. And maybe this
Yeah.
year God will grant me a child. Didn't happen. And the over and over and over. And the thing that I have to say, Carol, and I don't know if I've talked about this before, but there was a time when I was in this in between stage. And there's been a few times in my life where I've just been at my wits' end and I, didn't know what to do. And I was waiting for God to answer me on something. And I was angry, upset, ended up throwing hangers at the wall. I'm not saying
Mm.
I tell people to throw hangers at the wall, but I was so angry, Carol, and I was so upset and I was frustrated. I think the frustration was there. And I was just throwing these hangers at the wall. And
Mm.
it felt great. It was very cathartic in the moment. And I got done. And within like a couple hours, God gave me something. He's like, check this. And I had checked my Facebook, which I never checked my Facebook. I had a message in there that had been in there for 3 weeks. So here's the thing, like, God is never late. He's always on time. If I had just gone to my Facebook page, which someone had told me that they put something in there, they'd given me something, it was a job application, I would have looked, right? And I would have been like, oh, look at that. But God
Mm-hmm.
brought me to the end of myself. And I see this with Hannah. God brought her to the end of herself. She was desperate. She was
Mm.
angry. She was bitter. It says she wept
Yes.
in anguish. There's a lot of and the interesting thing is when we look at the next part of this,
Mm-hmm.
besides the vow, she tells God just
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you said, the Lord of hosts, if you will
Mm-hmm.
do indeed look on my affliction of your maidservant and remember me and not forget me, your servant. So she's talking about she feels forgotten by God. And I wonder how many of us feel forgotten by God at times. There are
Yes.
times when I think, is this really all you have for me, Lord? Is this really where you want me to go? Is this it? And I think, who hasn't been in that position,
Right.
right?
And I wanted to share too on that same line of thought is there are many things in our life where all of a sudden we're in this situation
Mm,
and we're looking at it from our perspective. And I think
right?
that's the slippery slope when we forget to bring God in sometimes. And we're focused on ourselves. We're focused on why. And this is where we can get stuck. And it's when we look internally instead of outwardly and pray to the Lord and ask Him. I've been there. It can be so hard. It's painfully hard. And yet, the peace that comes when you pray, also, He can reveal a message to you, and you realize, you know what? There's a plan. It's going to be okay. So I
Yeah.
definitely see where you're going with that. We don't know why things happen, but we know we
Yeah.
can trust in God, that He's faithful to those who love Him and that He'll work all things out for our good and for His glory.
Yeah. I also think it's okay to have those moments with God that are, raw.
Oh, yeah.
He wants to see, like, he wants us to have those. And I don't think what I was doing wasn't sin. I really was seeking after God. I think there's a lot of people that seek after God, especially in this situation. I think this was really hard because at the time, women didn't have jobs and careers and stuff. Their main job was to have children. And so
Mm-hmm.
her main job, her only thing, was taken away from her. And then she's getting ridiculed by her husband's other wife.
Right.
There's a lot going on here in this picture.
I have one more thing to say. You said the word raw. There was a season in my life where that was the key word. It's like I was carrying a lot of baggage and, holding it down and not, bringing it to the point where it needed to come up and be dealt with. And the key word was raw. I am going to be raw with God. This is it. I'm going to be raw. And a friend of mine, that was our word. It's like this has to happen. And that is so, I mean, if you take away one thing, be real, be raw. It's kind of the same thing with your situation with God. Yeah, I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
add that. But yes, let's go on. So she's in there praying, right? Eli is seeing her pray, but
Mm-hmm.
he thinks she's drunk because she's
Mm-hmm.
praying from her heart, but no words are coming out. So she's looking kind of different in how she's praying. It says, when she's in the temple praying, this is verse 12. Now it came about as she continued praying before the Lord that Eli was watching her mouth. As for Hannah, she was speaking in her heart. Only her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. So Eli thought she was drunk. Then Eli said to her, how long will you make yourself drunk? Put away your wine from you. She's just, like you said, she's pouring out her heart. She's crying out to the Lord in her own way. And he doesn't understand it because he's not seeing her talk. And she says, but Hannah replied, and this is verse 15, no, my Lord, I am a woman oppressed in spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I have poured out my soul before the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant as a worthless woman, for I have spoken until now out of my great concern and provocation. And the really cool thing about this, and this talks about Eli and his faith. He's a priest and he is faithful to the Lord. And he says, go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant your petition that you have asked of him. She's pretty elated. She says, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. It says, so the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. So I just love that interaction. Yeah.
Yeah. I did too. So when she says in verse 16, let your maidservant find favor in your sight, is she talking to Eli or do you think she's talking to God?
I think she was talking to Eli, but
Mm.
that's interesting because it's interesting because I don't quite know that answer, but I think it's Eli. She said, "Let your maidservant find favor in your sight." Because she calls him
Oh,
Lord. So, you know how the priests are elevated there because they were designated by God to be the keeper of the temple and make sure everyone is appropriately bringing their sin offerings and all their offerings, I should
that's
say.
interesting. And I like how he says, the God of Israel grant your petition. He doesn't know what she prayed for. She does not tell him what she was praying for. He doesn't know why she's sad. Maybe he does, but he doesn't really know what he says, just grant your petition, which is whatever you were praying for. Basically,
Yeah,
he's like,
right,
God grant it.
right.
And then she's excited because she's like, I just asked for a child and that's going to happen. There's the faith you were talking about at the very beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And so I love we have to go on because this is the best part. After returning home, they had relations and the Lord remembered her and she conceived. So I
Mm.
find that wording curious. The Lord remembered her, but she
Mm.
did conceive and Hannah bore a son, Samuel, and she dedicated him to the Lord. Now I do want to bring this up. At about 3 years old, she brought him to the Lord because she wanted to keep him until he was weaned, and so she got all that precious time with him and then brought him to the temple. And I don't know, I just think that would be really hard, but at the same time, a blessing to dedicate him to the Lord and know that he's doing the Lord's work. As a mother,
Mhm.
that would be super hard to not see him, but yet, what a blessing knowing that he's working for the Lord.
Yeah. The only time she saw him was when they came up to the temple once a year.
Right. That's it. And she would bring him a tunic because, he probably outgrew that one because he's growing.
Here's something interesting I want to read in 25. And this is when they
Yeah.
brought him to Eli. And they slaughtered a
Yes.
bull and brought the child to Eli. And she said, "Oh, my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood by you here praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition, which I asked him." And she's saying, look at it, look at, and said, "Therefore I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord." So they worship the Lord there. But I just think that
Mm-hmm.
is so cool because she's like, hey, look at this. This is the answer to prayer. You remember we were standing right here. She's doing this whole like going down and telling him, remember when you saw me, you thought I was drunk and here, my petition. Remember you told me that God would grant it. I have, she is not upset. Actually, I mean, I'm
Mm.
sure she's sad to leave him there, but can you imagine the joy she's showing
Yeah.
Eli and saying, "See, this is
Right.
this is what the Lord did. See he's good."
To your point, in Samuel chapter 2, she recites a prayer of praise to the Lord in thankfulness for
Mm-hmm.
having a son. It reminds me of Mary, Jesus' mother, who prayed a prayer of
Yeah.
praise as well when she was about to give birth to
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, there's some ties there, right?
Yeah, and it goes on, and we get to see more about
Oh,
Samuel
wait.
and well,
Oh, there's one more thing because we jumped around there. She did the prayer
okay,
of praise. And then in chapter 2 is where it talks about how Hannah and her husband, how they would go to worship at the temple once a year. And then what happened? There was another blessing. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying, "May the Lord give you children from this woman in place of the one she dedicated to the Lord." That's what it says. And Hannah conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2
that's so cool.
daughters.
Mm.
I just think that's really cool.
It says, "Meanwhile, the child Samuel grew before the Lord." So I just think that is interesting, and there's this little interlude. Okay, again, very reminiscent of like a play where you're so right between Hannah's her praises, and then that,
Yeah.
and it says the wicked sons of Eli, and you get this little in between of like Eli and what his children are
Oh,
doing,
yeah.
and then more about Samuel's childhood and ministry where his mom and dad have more children, and I just think it's interesting. We're going to start seeing more of that. Like the story is evolving and the characters are getting a little bit more defined. And so it's interesting.
Yes.
Keep reading because it's not about Hannah, but it's about Samuel was used by God a lot.
Yeah. and you learn more about Eli's sons.
This is the part where Samuel's sleeping and God calls him Samuel, Samuel, and he gets up and he goes to
Oh,
Eli and
yeah.
he
Well,
says,
don't.
"Hey, Eli,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
here."
I don't think you should tell him.
Just whetting the appetite of people.
Okay. It's a good story. I think a really good takeaway from this is like we talked about the faith and how it's so important to remember God and rely on him, that we can also ask upon the Lord and he'll hear us and he'll answer in his timing and in his will. That was my takeaway.
And my takeaway is cry out to God and, weep and have those emotions. God can handle it. He created emotions.
Mm.
And I don't think weeping and being anguished and crying out to God is a bad thing to get to. And I
No.
think it's the end of ourselves. And when we get to the end of ourselves, then God can work.
How about this? Be raw, be real, and God's going to be there.
Love it.
All right. I think it's time to pour
Out
your
joy. I pray, Lord, right now, as the person who is choosing you for the first time or renewing the relationship, Lord, that they will pray something like this: Lord, I have sinned and I have fallen short of the glory of God. I cannot do anything. I cannot be good enough to get into heaven, Lord. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, and I see that and I believe that and I receive that into my heart, into my life, into my being, Lord, and I ask that you would take away the sin, cleanse me from all unrighteousness so that I can live in the home with you in heaven for eternity. And I ask these things in your wonderful holy name. Amen.